everybody I know who does this. It's a different way in. And in my case, I come to it from both a theater and a history background. I loved theater as a kid, and I did a lot of theater growing up in high school. I got my undergraduate degree in theater and a master's in theater. But I realized I was really passionate about history, and that's really where my heart was. So I went and I got my PhD in history, and I started working at history museums and historic house museums. And someone in just a casual conversation found out, that I had done theater, and they said, gosh, we've always wanted someone to do a historical portrayal. So I did a portrayal of a local woman, and it was such a fun way to approach history. And it was such a way of getting at what you don't always get in the books. What did this person feel? What did they think about? What did they wear? All that really fun stuff. And it was storytelling, which is what I love most about history. So I started doing other women, and then I started doing other women, and suddenly I was doing a couple a month, and then it was a couple a week, and then it was 8 or 10 a week, and then it was a full-time job. So it's what I do full-time. Yeah. This is going to sound really cliche, because people ask me that a lot. It's like choosing your favorite child. It really is, because to do a portrayal, you really have to get to know the person. Not only because you want to, but because there's a lot of questions that come up, and people will want to know more. So you try to read as much as you can, and the more you read about a person, the more fascinating they get. Every human life story is fascinating to me. So really, and the other thing is that each character is very different. Some women that I portray, their life story is really important. Other people, like for example, Eleanor Roosevelt is a really challenging character because there's so many facets to her life. But then I do a Titanic survivor, and the part of her life that is most fascinating is the story of the sinking of the Titanic. So the programs come together according to the person's life story. And in the case of Amelia, the disappearance is such a big factor of it. That kind of determined the whole shape of the program. I try to read, first of all, as many secondary source biographies as I can, because I want to know what's out there, what's been said, who are what's the definitive biography. I want to get familiar with all that. Then I've discovered it's really helpful to look at children's biographies, because it gets a sense of what has been pulled out as culturally significant about this person, and in what ways are they seen by the general public. That tends to be really beautifully expressed in children's biographies. Then, to do the actual work of it, I try to read as much primary source evidence, and I try to have the programs as much as possible based on that person's own writings, letters, journals, autobiographies. In the case of Amelia Earhart, we're very fortunate because she wrote 3 books. She wrote numerous magazine and newspaper articles. She was interviewed a lot. There's just a lot of writing by her out there. Typically, because of copyright issues, I have to tell her stories in my own words, but we know a lot about her. So I use primary sources for the actual script writing. And I do work from a script. Some people who do portrayals do it all improv, but I'm a theater person, so I need my script. It's funny because I was reading an article about how to write a biography, and it reminded me so much of writing a script like this, because even though you're wanting to convey information about the person, it's still a journey, like a story, and you want to take the audience, in my case, or the reader in a case of a biography, you want it to be a cohesive narrative. So I'm always looking for some kind of a narrative through line. In the case of this particular program, I structured it so that she's in the plane on the last day and can't find Howland Island, and flashes back on her life, and particularly focusing on her lifelong interest in adventure and record breaking, because that is so much a part of understanding who she was as a person. From a little kid, when she was, building a roller coaster in her backyard, she loved adventure. And that was the through line to the end. And you want to take the audience on an emotional journey, because it can't just be a Wikipedia article, read out loud on stage. It's got to have a narrative journey. Oh, there's so many. I have a list of like 20 women that I would love to portray. And so much of it has to be someone I'm passionate about and someone that the public is hooked into. That's why doing Amelia Earhart is constantly of public interest. But some characters, I had a Downton Abbey character when that was popular. It's always fun when there's something in the public air that people want to learn more about. And I try to, as much as possible, line those up as well as I could. But there's always people out there. I tend to be interested in either people their name is really well known, but people don't really know their story. And that's true in many ways about Amelia, as well as Eleanor Roosevelt, or even I've done a portrayal of Estee Lauder, and people know her name, but how many people know really her story? But I'm also interested in people who aren't as well known, who I think should be better known. So for example, Rachel Carson, the environmentalist who wrote Silent Spring, I'm shocked that her name is not better known. So I'm interested in how and why certain people get remembered and other people don't. That's fascinating to me. There are, and it's really fun with each character. It's different questions that I get. I do Jackie Kennedy, and always I get asked, why did she marry Aristotle Onassis? Which my program is focused on the Kennedy years, but that's such an overwhelming interest. In the case of Amelia, it's fascinating because the audience tends to want to talk about the mystery of the disappearance. And my initial thought was, her life is so fascinating, let's focus on that. But then I realized the mystery of her disappearance is part of the reason she's remembered at all. And you can't separate her life story from public fascination with the disappearance. So I always learn something from what people are interested in talking about. And to be honest, it keeps me engaged because I never know what people are going to ask, so I really have to stay on top of it. And in the case of Amelia, there's always new theories, new discoveries, new ideas, and that's part of the fun of it. Historical portrayals they're becoming more and more popular. And in the Chicago area, we're really fortunate. I know of at least a dozen people who do this, and all fascinating in their own ways. And it's not that way in the rest of the country. I was in South Carolina a couple years ago, and someone said, how can we get more people like this? And I thought, what do you mean? There's a lot. So I don't know what it is about the Chicago area. I don't know if that this is just a great community for theater and for people interested in learning and history and culture, but there's something about this area that historical portrayals have become really popular, and that's great. It's great for history. It's great for what it says about people's ongoing interest in history. So we're lucky.